competing in, we are repeating in, we are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.
Welcome to FiDE, Foundation for Intentional Decisions, and this episode is number 10. And in this episode we are going to talk about the applications of basically the whole previous 9 episodes we have talked about, and look at different areas where this kind of thinking can be applied. My name is Jens Rinnelt, and welcome also to my lovely co-host, Stellan Nordahl.
Thank you very much, Jens, and hello everyone, and welcome back to the FiDE broadcast. I really looked forward to this episode. It took us 9 other episodes to come here to see how intentional decisions really can apply to life. And we have been exploring life, but still we haven't really felt it. Really engaged into it, and that's hopefully what we can do today, I guess. And I would really like to explore different applications. And when we talk about applications, maybe we should give some kind of an explanation of what we are thinking of. Do you have some help here or some ideas?
Yeah, in some way you can say this is the result, or how do you apply, like I said, this kind of thinking into, for example, personal development as a topic, organizational development, societal development. But on the other hand, I also believe application is already what we have done before. I mean, it's not like a separation again between thinking and now we execute. I mean, it has always already been in the process of being applied, because by gaining this kind of thinking, this kind of understanding, a systemic perspective on life, we already basically change what we're doing and already change the application of our knowledge, so to say.
So what you're saying is that there is no opposition between theoretical views and practical views? Is that more or less what you're saying, if we use the terminology that we're used to?
Yeah.
Or maybe if we use the terminology that we have explored, we don't separate ourselves from ourselves. That is, we don't separate the world into an inner and outer. We don't separate what is measurable from what is not measurable. And we don't separate, we have used the tree metaphor, we don't separate the roots from the crown and the stem. So it's all there at the same time. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, exactly. This is a good description, I believe. And I mean, they both fulfill different functions, as we have said. The tree has different functions. The leaves have different functions than the roots. I mean, that's by default designed like this. But in the end, they form a holistic, coherent picture where everything comes together. So we need to have a good theory, as well as we need to have a good
practice,
I guess, yes.
So Jens, if you could choose, what application is you mostly interested in exploring right now then? What is your, if you could choose, I mean, a lot of those, I would say all of those episodes we haven't talked before, so we actually decided upon not to talk too much about the topic. So when we started out with each of those episodes, we were more like, I was blanking from where you were supposed to say, and you were blank from my perspective or my ideas. So right now I'm eager to say, please let us explore an application. Which one would you like to choose, Jens?
Two topics that are very close to my heart are personal development and organizational development. And I think, again, we can't separate them because we need the people working in an organization to develop understanding and insights and the good practices. But again, if we come together as a group, we already form an organization, and that is mostly how we nowadays collaborate, or I guess through whole human history have collaborated in order to evolve.
Shall we start with personal development then? Because I believe that since I started working with those thoughts 12, 13 years ago, I've seen, first of all, I've seen there is kind of a direction, but I've also seen that there is almost by default this separation between practical stuff and you can call it meditation, yoga, mindfulness, and when I say it's separated, it's what I mean then is that you can have those experiences on a personal level and you can have it on what people call a private level, but then they go back to their work or go back to school or go back to whatever they are doing without applying in it. And that is why we call it application, because something you apply in life. So what would then happen if, for instance, if you go to yoga and you would apply those principles into your work life, how would that look like then? Have you thought of that? Or are you practicing stuff like this, meditation or
some kind of
yoga?
body work, qigong, for example. And I mean, I think something that we have to consider before also speaking about the application, and if that hasn't been becoming clear in the last episodes, is the nature of work has also shifted. And I guess that's also why we are talking about a new way of thinking and a new kind of framework about making decisions intentionally on a daily basis on different levels. So previously there was, I would say, a manufacturing process. Most of the work was done by hand. So you could optimize by making, having a very efficient production line, for example. But I mean, since I guess the 60s, knowledge has been the most predominantly nature of work, so to say. So everything we nowadays do, even though there is still production processes, it is more about where do we apply it, how do we use that knowledge in different business areas. It is about, as I said, innovative ways of coming up with new solutions or using existing solutions in different contexts. And that is by nature a work which you can't really make efficient by paying people more per output. So this brings us then to, okay, why do we use different practices? And then the question here is, if I'm in harmony, maybe in balance between all these four functions that we talked about, the four levels, then this is where I become whole as a person. And for example, I can do yoga in my lunch break or do some sports in between tasks. Why? Because the physical movement will also influence my cognitive capacity.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking of if we use, for instance, movement as a terminology for having a physical break. Why can't we use movement in where we live and what we do? For instance, in meetings, we can include the thinking of moving around by doing, for instance, walk and talks. You can go outside, out in the nature. Having strategical meetings out in the nature will bring things up that you won't see otherwise. Having an experience together out in nature or out in the city or wherever it is also brings up new ideas, and it also takes away the previous patterns that were in that meeting room. and patterns between people, and patterns between roles and functions, and patterns between thoughts. So I would say taking with you the principles, for instance, from, I don't know, but the principle of meditation will probably be to listen to yourself or something like that. What happens if you do that and listen to others? If you use that principle, instead of talking, maybe you should actually use a principle of active listening. And what will then happen if you're actively listening to what people say instead of being occupied by talking by yourself?
I really like this approach. Yeah, and I believe right now we are really on a verge of seeing, how can I say, a lot of physical systems breaking down, and I think what is critical to understand nowadays is that not only what can we see and observe, like what are the symptoms that we basically see, but also what do they mean. And I mean by that we're already moving from a physical observation of what am I seeing towards how do I metaphysically interpret this. And again, as we talked, there is a correlation between, I mean, what do certain events mean? And I think that is where we believe, or where I believe, where we are now at a critical point where we have to understand or try to seek insights into why are these things that we see that are dominating the news happening. And for example, coming back to organizations, I mean, we see a lot of mental health issues rising right now. A lot of people speak about they don't see really the meaning in what they are doing anymore, or organizations can't provide that meaning. And I mean, these are all metaphysical constructs, but I mean, they still have an effect on our physical body.
There was an interesting article half a year ago, something from, it was in the US, 100 or something CEOs for I don't know how many, where the companies were registered, but there was some kind of a they were like writing an article together about we're not only here to maximize the shareholder value, we're here to do something more. And they were talking about purpose, and they were talking about meaning and so on. And I believe that it's not only something that we're seeing happening, it's actually something we need to do as humans, as world, and as humans, society and human community.
And I mean, this is exactly what I'm thinking of, is like there has been a lot of focus now, and I think also with the help of the SDGs, on environmental issues. But these are, if we think about the triple bottom line, and also the social sustainability, I mean, environmental sustainability and I guess the economic as the strongest indicator have been the most observable or the most predominant aspects. And now we are also seeing the value of social sustainability in designing organizations, in working and living together, which includes things that what you said, meaning, purpose, learning. What do we learn from certain
and
situations?
also some kind of an ethical framework and maybe an ethical sustainability. I would say that Corona, we talked about Corona opportunities, but also Corona have provided us with a enormous test bed called the world. So we have the last months, and maybe when you watch this, it maybe have turned into years, I don't know. So, but right now we're still in some kind of, it's quite new still to the world. We are talking about half a year in maximum since the first cases from Corona came along. And we talked about it earlier that the last couple of months have been almost like 10 years of consciousness raising in the society. And as it provides us with a test bed, for me at least, it says what is sustainable and not sustainable, what is reasonable, not reasonable, what is to value and not to value, and so on. So there is some kind of a possibility right now to look for an ethical framework and maybe decide upon such a one. And I mean, we shouldn't maybe stop flying, but not the way we have done. Maybe we shouldn't stop bringing up animals, but maybe not in the way we have done. Maybe we should, and so on. Have meetings, of course, but not in the same way we have done. And a lot of things that are brought up right now into the surface has been there as something going on for a very long time, maybe 50 years or something, that we have been blind to. And when we're talking about blindness, I would say again, we haven't even seen what can't be measured. So first of all, we have to see what can't be measured, then we have to value it. And when we value it, we can also embrace it and have it as internalized into the systems we have. So, I mean, a lot of people also say that, yeah, we have a system that is like making people ill, or making the society crashing, or maybe the environment doing harm to the environment. What I would say, we have systems that deliver what they're set to deliver. So we have to change the systems, and that is us. So while we're now realizing that there is more than what then we can see, it's also easier for us to value it.
Yeah, and I think that is for me the biggest change on a personal development level, is instead of asking my environment what does it for me, it's like I need to ask myself, what can I do and provide for my environment? How can I contribute to something? What is it that I would like to do ideally?
Yeah, and also already in school that we have some kind of an idea on what is creating stuff. I mean, everything we see that have been made by man, it's originating from a thought, some kind of a fantasy, a dream, or whatever it is that has a metaphysical origin from start, and then it has been manifested into physical stuff. And when we did that, and at the same time forgot to value the fantasy, it's very odd. And I would say I've had a lot of interesting thoughts and so on concerning this, because if you look at the universities, we have behavioral science, but not fantasy science. So, or dreaming. You can't like go into an ordinary university and say, I would like to take a course in dreaming. And we talked about this before, about lucid dreamings, and we also talked about when stuff is manifested from your thoughts. And yeah, we have a lot to explore and experience together here, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, if you take away the source of inspiration, I mean, how can you be innovative then in the end if there are no new ideas being generated, but you're basically stuck with the manifestation of maybe at this point outdated ideas?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, we talked about that previously, also in some of the episodes concerning the tools we have to manifest or to develop stuff for personal development, for organizational development, business development, societal development, strategical tools like SWOT and so on, and they will only bring what they were set there to bring. I mean, the consciousness level from which they were created, that is what they will create. So we will get more of what we don't want right now, as long as we don't change the way we think and the way we do. So okay, so that's personal development. If we go into some more of the applications and apply those thoughts of intentional decisions into, what would the next topic then be? What if we would something that I've been very curious about is the oceans. The oceans, they are like everything that is beneath the surface is like hidden more or less from humans. And I wouldn't say this is the only reason, but this is probably one of the main reasons to why we pollute the oceans. We just pour everything out into the ocean. It's you know the solution to pollution is delusion. You just spread it out in the. What would happen if we would value what is beneath the surface? I think that is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of, whatever form, or if it's on a personal level, organization, or societal level, we can always go back to these four functions and ask ourselves, and then maybe starting from what you're saying with an ethical framework. Because I believe in the end it is about my own actions and being aware of the effect on whatever I'm affecting. And it could be different things, could be nature, could be organization, other people, could be myself. And of course, I won't probably be aware of everything I do, but the one things that I'm conscious of, I should be able to steer into the direction that is beneficial.
Yeah, but then you have to be able to see it. I mean, people can click when they order stuff on the internet. They can click like free shipping. There is no such thing as a free shipping. There is someone or something somewhere that pays this price. And when you click that, you don't realize that there is a plastic island created on the other side of the globe. And I really love the idea of that was presented to me a couple of months or maybe years ago. I don't remember exactly. It's about awareness of what is beneath the surface. It's called ocean literacy. So when you get aware that there is something beneath the surface and you start valuing life below water, I believe that there is something happening with you. At the same time, you also value what you can't see with yourself. So it's almost the same shift in some sense. That when you realize that there is like a landscape beneath water or the surface into the water, and that landscape it's dreamlike and it's huge. It has mountains, it has valleys, it has its own creatures, and it has the biggest creatures on earth going around in the ocean. And this is very symptomatic actually to what we do, right? Because last year it was I think I don't know exactly when the date was, but there was a date when you were supposed to not put what you call sulfate, into the air any longer. So the idea was then to just take the what do you call it, the stream, and instead of going into the air, you just put it down into the water. So that was what we did as humanity when this was put into our that was something we should do with all the ships. They should end the pollution of with sulfate, and then they just went from air into water.
So what you're basically saying is that we need to have a transparency of like what is the effect of our actions. For example, if I sign up for, I don't know, any social media platform, I don't pay anything for it, but still someone is using my data,
it's
personal
called
data.
let's call externalities. Every choice you have leads to some consequences. Some of them are easily seen. You can be aware of those consequences. So, but there will probably also be consequences that can't be seen, and those are called externalities. And those externalities are maybe that's where the big price is paid.
And that's why I'm thinking of, if we start with an ethical framework, what's the biggest, I guess, starting point that we can consider? It has to be planet Earth. Maybe even more.
Yeah.
But right now,
life, I guess, also. If we would look at the planet as something that is alive, which it is, I would say this will bring at least forward the discussion and the dialogue about is it reasonable to do this? Is it sustainable to do this? Is it what we want to do, and so on? But of course, we know that the animals are alive, and we treat them like shit for a long time. So, I mean, maybe it's not enough. We have to have an ethical framework that is more or less guiding us or telling us what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and I guess the need for that one is right now. When you go into intentional decisions, what we suggest there is to have empathy as one of those guiding principles. And if you use empathy, for instance, and you go into the biggest creatures on Earth, the big whales, they communicate by sending signals to each other for very long distances. But what happens then if there is a large ship coming, a tanker going? This is noise pollution. And noise pollution hasn't been known for that long. I mean, I don't know exactly when someone came up with the idea that we're polluting the oceans with noise. But last year there was a report from the Coast Guard of the United States saying that this is one of the biggest problems for the big animals in the oceans. So before that, it was not like commonly known at all. And that's interesting, because how do you meet and mate when there is like you can't hear anything?
Yeah, and I mean, if you put yourself into the shoes is probably not the right metaphor here, but I mean, if you put yourself in the position of that animal, I mean, you can imagine for yourself that this is not a nice situation.
No. There are a lot of those animals, the big ones, the big whales, that they go directly up on land, and they do everything to get out of the ocean, and then people find them and they drag them down into the ocean and put them out in the ocean again, and then they do the same thing. They turn around 180 degrees and goes back full speed. So we don't exactly know about why that phenomena is happening. One suggestion is that the noise is it's too hard to bear. So they're committing suicide, more or less, to get rid of the noise. But that's something that we don't know about, but that is one of the theories behind it.
But I mean, at the same time, everything that we don't know about, we can also learn about. I mean,
I like that one. Everything we don't know about, we can learn about. Yeah. Shall we take learning then as the next application? We have been into personal development and into the oceans. What about learning? Is that interesting for you to
yeah, I mean,
talk about?
It's interesting, and I don't know. It's I don't want to say it's like just lifelong learning is essential and that's it. But I mean, we have to have a curious mindset and an openness towards making new experiences, to letting things emerge without already judging them. And yeah, at the same time, I'm also a little bit, how can I say it, like, I mean, can we ever be as objective and let things emerge without us judging them?
Is objective the thing? I mean, can you even be an objective observer if you use the intentional decisions ideas that there is always a choice? That it implies that there is not only physical materia, but also some kind of a consciousness that is fundamental. That means then that you can never be an objective observer. You always affecting the system in some way, or putting in your own ideas into it, and of course that could be a problem. But on the other hand, that also means that learning is not linear any longer. That means that learning is not only dependent on some kind of a knowledge that you're supposed to gain and then repeat, and when you repeat it, get the high grade. So that means that if that has to happen, learning is I can learn from you and you can learn from me, and the best thing is that we can learn together. And that means that we're in the same room having experience together. At some point, maybe you are the one who is taking the lead and teach me, and then at some point I can teach you, and then at some point we can learn together.
I like this because this is exactly what I was thinking of as well. It's like learning changes from just receiving information to
Creating it.
maybe or creating it, but maybe even creating it together. As you said, we learn mostly in our dialogues with other people, because there it's mostly where we test ideas, even though sometimes we are not conscious of it. But I mean, if I say something and you say, oh, I have a different opinion about it, then this is already an opportunity for us both to learn. Like, not on the matter who's right or who's wrong, but I mean, what arguments do you have for your position, and can I understand them? Can I validate them?
Did we talk about I guess we talked about the words when we talked about in the previous program about dialogue and discussion. I guess we just to take that discussion or dialogue into this. A discussion means to dissect and take apart. And debate is even to take the arguments and knock in the other's head. And dialogue was when you understood the other part's argument. And if you take that into learning, I would say we all come there with pieces that fit together in some way. It's like Lego bricks. I guess that the difference between what was previously known as the existing paradigm, now it was the old paradigm, and the new one that we're exploring, is that in the old one we had a puzzle. We had a puzzle with pieces that were supposed to fit together, and there were exact amounts of them, and they were supposed to be put in some kind of an order, giving a picture that was already decided upon in advance, and you were supposed to find all the pieces and put them in exact order. While the other description here would be Lego bricks, where you have Lego where you can put into any configuration or any idea that you want to explore. Or so instead of educating the way you put the pieces into the puzzle, you explore what you can create with the Lego bricks.
I mean, something that is very closely related to taking this lifelong learning approach and also believing that we always evolve by learning new things, also requires us to, I guess, be more appreciative or maybe less judgmental on if we see someone doing it. I sometimes have myself the expectation that I expect a professional person in to do these things, and then what I mean by this is that you create some kind of expectation of this needs to be perfectly ordered, structured, and then you don't allow the room for anybody to make a mistake, because that would basically be not professional. But I mean, if we are all on this constant learning journey, how can we ever say someone is finished, or how someone is now mastering his or her expertise area?
But this also this application area of learning, it also comes into how we look at humans. A couple of years ago I was visiting one of the governmental parts of the Swedish system called Specialpedagogiska skolmyndigheten. It was like a part of the government where they help special teachers. What is it called? Special teachers, maybe, I don't know. That work, and up to that point, they had been working with kids with special needs, and they were so glad because they were also from the 1st of January, the next coming year, also being able to work with those who have special abilities. And we looked at each other there, and we were like, okay, haven't all kids got special abilities and also special needs? So if we look at the kids like everyone has special needs and special abilities, then there won't be any problem for those who were like very special, or I mean, all of us have some kind of a need and also some kind of a ability that can be developed. And if we want to look at the people or the person or the kids like this is normal. So instead having some norm, which is the normal, that's why we use the word normal, having a norm saying that you're always special and you're unique.
Mm.
That would probably mean that you can't have those one direction big classroom presentations. You would probably need to have another way of learning.
Yeah, I mean, you have to in some way find the individualization for every person, every human being, every student in that context.
Yeah, and you can ask that person, what are you interested in? And of course there is some kind of, at least I wouldn't say of course, but up to now we have had some kind of curriculum, but that doesn't oppose that you do it in your own order. So even if you have a curriculum, some of those topics are maybe more interesting in some certain time of your life, and another time, maybe a year later, you're more interested in whatever it is. And so it could be personalized. I like personalized instead of individualized, if that's okay.
What's the difference for you?
Yeah, the difference for me is also concerning this shift, because the individual, it's taking again from taking away from its context. Why personalize means considering your personality and your person and your personal ideas.
Yeah, I like that.
So okay, so learning probably has a lot of connections to different applications. One of them is, can I choose one?
Please.
I don't know what what word to use now, so I use the old paradigm word, leadership. And
why can't we call it leadership anymore?
Yeah, we can do it, but then we have to rethink the meaning and reinvent leadership, because when we say leadership, at least I've been taught, I studied leadership from start in the Swedish Army, and I'm a Swedish Army officer, and leadership is, when you say that, you actually imply, and I would say more than imply, it's actually equals to lead or be led. And then people try to redefine it as a self-leadership, and you have to lead yourself to be able to lead others. Why do you have to lead others? If we learn together, why can't we decide together?
I mean, you also said that within learning, sometimes you learn from me, sometimes I learn from you, and sometimes we learn together. And isn't that, this is my interpretation of leadership. So sometimes I just take a lead, and then because maybe I know something more about the topic, then I'm naturally drawn to maybe take the lead in doing something about it.
Definitely. And if you listen to this podcast, or you watch the YouTube pod, there are examples that have been up there for a long time. The Reggio Emilia is one of them, Montessori, Maria Montessori, and the Montessori school system, it's another one. So there are a lot of examples where you can show that this is possible, where you can have a personalized curriculum, where you can have a personalized study plan, and where you can have a personalized experience of what you're supposed to learn. So there are possibilities, I would say. And they are not new. I mean, the Maria Montessori, it's like 120 years ago, something like that, when she came up with the idea that kids are capable of learning.
So what I'm thinking I understand from you is that you would change the meaning of leadership into that we don't have to lead others.
Yeah, don't have is not the right word, because there will probably be times where leading others is needed, where leading others is the right thing to do. But I guess most of the time, I mean, I trust you that you have the ability to take choices that are reasonable and good under the circumstances that you're in, and in the context that you're facing. So why shouldn't you do that?
So by leadership you mean reducing maybe the interference or influence on other people? consciously?
No, not consciously, more by default, more or less by the system that we're in. I mean, we have designed hierarchical systems, which is one thing. We can have that, of course, if you like that, but then applied the idea of someone better fit to decide than you are, even if it's not like that. That is what we believe in. Authority in hierarchical system. So you put your trust in an authority, and that authority is also in top of the hierarchical system. So it says more or less that no one except of that authority is fit to make decisions that are right, or that are good, or that are, I mean, it's an idea, and you can choose that, but it's just an idea, and you can choose another one.
Yeah. I mean, I have been disappointed from my expectations that I had from authorities so far in my life. So that's where I can definitely relate to what you're saying. So what would then the new paradigm,
what would that look like?
perspective of leadership
that's a
look
good
like?
question. I would say leading together, if leading is the right word. Self-organizing is maybe the best term. Co-creation maybe is another terminology you can use. Of course you can use leadership, but then you have to redefine it, and you really have to be cautious about people and their views of leadership, because if you use it, what you more or less is saying is what you're used to. So if you have had or if you come from a culture, a business culture or a societal culture where you have a strong leadership that has been more or less the way of working, then I would say you're not only stuck with leadership as a lead or be led, you're also creating that over and over again. So yeah, it's leadership is a word I would say that is I don't know what the expression is, but amplifying itself. I mean, right now in Sweden, we have had the corona here for a couple of months, and right up to yesterday or the day before yesterday, it was the government and the parties that are very often having debates, and they are discussing, and they are even debating with more or less not only words. It's also like really nasty situations coming up. It has been away for a while, so they have had like a peace-like dialogue, which I really appreciate, I would say. And right now, it was the day before yesterday, I guess, that was the first debate again for the leaders of the parties, and that was not nice. So I can look at it and I can think, didn't you learn anything? Weren't you here when we the rest of us were like having those huge experiences where people come together, they helped each other? You and I, we have talked about it, like Mother Earth is saying, go up to your room and come down when you can behave. And they came down and they couldn't behave, so maybe they will be sent up again. I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking of right now is like, could they agree on having dialogues because they basically cared about the same thing? I mean, they were probably caring about the well-being of Sweden's population. So they all had an interest in creating an agenda or activities that were contributing to that. Whereas now maybe the focus goes into other topics again, and it becomes more spreaded, different focuses for different political areas, for political parties, and therefore they have to represent again a specific kind of thinking, or
I mean, if you take any other person right now in the work situation, this is their work situation, right? If you take any other person and you, for instance, someone who have now experienced working from home, let's say that little thing, that is not huge, but for a lot of people it has been a revelation, more or less, that you could actually work from home. And organizations that were previously, it was like it wasn't possible at all. Now it was not only possible, it was entirely possible. Would that person say, no, I have to go to this place where I have to travel for 1.5 hours to be in this place when I could do the same job, maybe even better, if I worked from home? Is that even relevant? Then you haven't learned anything. Then learning is like zero. And this is what actually happened here, I guess, when they had this first party leader debate. So I wouldn't judge them yet, but if they don't shape up, they will probably be sent up again from Mother Earth will say again, go up and don't come back before you can behave.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of not only do we need to think about like, you know, what's the first principle and what is an ethical framework, but also why are we doing this? Who are we doing it for in the end? And then sometimes we get lost in optimizing our own activities or optimizing things for the how can I say it, sake of improving the efficiency. But is that always leading us to creating an impact that we want to create?
Yeah, and efficiency is connected to measuring. So as soon as we measure again and only value what is measurable, efficiency is not only crucial, it's the thing. And again, why do we do what we do? That is what you want to put on the table and say, this is what is the purpose? Is the purpose this shareholder value, or what is the purpose? Is the purpose whatever it is, or what is it? Is it efficiency, or is it to be in opposition? Is that the purpose? I mean, can't be.
Yeah, this is why I'm thinking of political parties. I mean, is their purpose to represent the ideology of the party, or is it being elected from the population and represent the interests of the population despite the ideology of a party? And maybe this is where we have to rethink the political system and say, well, building up on what you said before, if we take the word of self-organization or self-leadership, then I have to basically make my own voice heard in a democratic dialogue, and we need to listen to everybody's voices.
Yeah, and those voices that are not present in the room, I guess.
Especially those ones.
I don't know how many workshops I've been at, or dialogues, or
I mean, we can take an example of, do we have a party, for example, the ocean? Who represents the ocean in a political dialogue?
Didn't we talk about natural rights in one of the previous episodes? I really love that when in that case the river got its own rights.
Yeah. But it's again making something which we don't see observable.
Yeah. So, should we take another application? And
yeah, you seem to be excited.
Yeah, it's your turn. Choose.
Okay, I can choose
freely. Anyone. Maybe it's something we can explore together that we haven't been thinking of before.
I would like to spend a minute on organizations, because we just talked about it, and the question here is for me very present, and it seems to be, from where I stand, so much limiting is this shareholder value. I mean, everything we do is based on how much money does it generate, and better today than tomorrow. And we have this quarterly focus, and we don't take into consideration externalities or long-term perspective of the business.
Generational investment and so on.
I mean, I can go on forever, but I mean, the general problem here is that we only value the things that are measurable and that we can see.
This is where the shift comes then. If we go into intentional decisions, all of a sudden we realize that 3 to 4 months is stupidity if we optimize on that. If we are supposed to optimize on something, we have to optimize on generations and generational investment, which means that you actually destroy stuff by having a 3 or 4 months time span, or and at the same time things are changing so fast today that we don't even know that what will happen in maybe 3 or 4 years. So there is some kind of a interesting. I mean, if we go for 3 or 4 months for here and 3 or 4 generations there, and we go in between and maybe come to 3 or 4 years, I would say we can't use goal setting any longer. Setting goals won't help. We have to find those principles again to be able to have a long-term perspective. And we have to have principles that we decide upon together will help us having a long-term perspective.
And I want to pause here for a while, because this is also a shift I think that is really essential in how do we look at the world, and maybe the word is complexity here. It's because in the old paradigm we assumed that everything is how it was in the past, can basically predict the future. We can use some kind of guidance from what we have done in the past to predict the future.
Yeah, extrapolate. I can't say the word. Extrapolate. Yeah, you know what it is.
It's basically you create a budget based on how much you earned last quarter, and then you have to increase it by 5 to 10% next, and this is how you grow, and very steady and very controllable. But what you're saying actually here is that we are, I think, now at the point in time where we don't know what the future will bring. I mean, we have this exponential growth curve, exponential technology, and you like to call it the opportunity curve. If you look at these things, we can't really predict anything that is going to happen in the future. So that it means we are, from now on, we are realizing we don't know anything anymore.
No, that's
which is by definition needs to make us more open, more experimental, but it also brings us to how do we navigate in complexity.
Yeah, and also how do we create in times of complexity and in complex systems. And there is a fantastic quote by Yogi Berra, you know, the coach Yogi Berra, who had those fantastical quotes. He says that the future isn't what it used to be. I really love that, and it's so true, because, as you said, we're taught to predict based on what was, but now we can more or less conclude that such a prediction will definitely not help us any longer. And again, we need some kind of a framework, navigation, a map or something that can help us taking decisions based on something more than shareholder value, something more than short-term perspective, something more than what we used to do.
And I mean, we talked about principles in one of the previous episodes, which are a good way to navigate complexity. The intentional decision model provides us already with 3 dimensions and 3 principles to orient on ourselves on. I think that could be a good starting point to reflect upon. Is this helpful for us? Is this in the direction that we want our generations, the upcoming generations, planet Earth, to go to?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be that tricky. You can actually ask yourself questions. I'm also Rotarian. The Rotary, they have had as an organization the 4-way test. It's like 4 questions you ask yourself before you take a decision. It doesn't have to be tricky. One of them is like, is this fair to everyone that is involved? That is one of the questions, and I would say having simple principles or theoretical principles. That's the way how you terminology within complexity. Theoretical means easy to understand or easy to
like a
grasp.
thumb of rule almost.
Yeah, thumb of rule. Yeah,
something like the golden rule, for example.
Yeah,
treat others as you want to be treated. And
if we would apply that one,
I mean, we would already be on a good level.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, you can even take it further and say, like, treat others as you wanted to be treated.
Yeah,
I mean, that is even putting more emphasis on empathy and
treat others like they want to be treated. then you have to ask them, how do you want to be treated? And there is a lot of steps here you can take, and finding them will, I would say one of the ideas could be to invent new ones, but I would say that is not necessary. I mean, we have a lot of systems that have been working before. We can go in looking into previous civilizations, the big religious principles we have, both the world religions, but also indigenous people and civilizations that have been around for maybe thousands and thousands of years. And again, when we talked about the tree metaphor, we talked about, okay, what if we ask the tree before we cut it down? Is it okay to cut you down? That means again that the river has its own rights, that the tree has some kind of a right, and the ocean and so on. So all living organisms, and maybe more than that.
Yeah, I think that's a paradigm that I would really like to be part of.
And we're there right now. We're in the eye, really, of the storm. And I think this is where we end this first 10 episodes, I guess. We have been on a journey of exploring life together. We dug into the history of ideas and the ideas of choice. We went through, the fundamental assumptions and the guiding principles. We talked about principles. We've been into those loops of learning. First loop where you go into the what's, the second loop where you go into the hows, the third loop where you go into the whys, and then the fourth loop which I believe right now is what we need to do, and that is ask ourselves questions. How do we look at the world? And what was previously taken as granted is maybe what we shouldn't take as granted any longer, and question it not only because of question it, but also because of we need maybe to find new ideas, new ways forward. And then we moved into choices, and we moved into the language, and now we're here, and we have dug into some of those applications that are called life.
And I think, as you said, the question of how do we look at the world? Is it a machine metaphor that we can use according to our wants and simply replace parts that we don't like? Or is it more a symbiotic relationship that we live as a living organism in symbiosis with our planet, with other people, and as you said, asking other people, other beings, how do they want to be treated? I think it's a very good start to reflect in this eye of the storm of how we got here, but also I think we have talked about a lot of ways of how we could also get out of it again, and how can we move forward.
So thank you very much to all of you that have been with us during those 10 episodes, this first season with FiDE broadcast, the Foundation for Intentional Decision. And if you're interested in the model itself, it's about intentional decisions, but it's not much more than a model. You have to do the intentional decisions yourself, and we as a world, and so on. And if you want to know more about it, we have gathered stuff. Both there is a short booklet, and there is also a little short instruction movie, and we have books and stuff like that. So if you're interested, please contact us. And for now, I would say let's end this show with some kind of if you get to choose a quote from the new paradigm, what would that quote then be in the terms of the application of quotes?
Okay, say that again.
Yeah, if the application of quotes, all quotes, a lot of quotes in the old paradigm. What would a quote be in the new paradigm?
So you're looking for a specific quote, or?
Yeah, you can find a new one. You can create a quote by yourself right now.
I would say a quote that represents my how I look at the world right now is that I'm everything.
Quote by Jens Rinel. And I would also provide a quote here. Then I would say, what we choose is what we get. So that's my quote. So what is your quote? Love to talk more in the next season of FiDE broadcast. But for now, the 10th episode is ended, and thank you very much for being here with us. And please help us here. If you want to help us out, contact us and spread those episodes. Also help us by supporting us on Patreon. We have a Patreon account, patreon.com/bestfortheworld. And if you want to look at more broadcasting ideas like this, you can also visit bestforthe.world, where there was a live broadcast sent this spring. 80 hours of live broadcasting now on a YouTube channel near you. So thanks again, and see you in the next season.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We are creating the world we're now living in. We are competing in. We are repeating in. We are believing in. It's time for us to shift our mind from best in the world to best for the world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. It creates a new world to mind a shift, intentionality, perceptuality, conceptuality. We are choosing to shift our mind to best for the world, best for our world. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional. Make decisions intentional, to take decisions intentional, making decisions intentional.